So one of the things that is very exciting right now is that we are going to hear from somebody who has really made her life's calling human-centered design, which is, I think, part of what we've been talking about. And that is Sarah Stein Greenberg. Sarah is the author of Creative Acts for Curious People, which I'm holding up as a prop, that is also in your bag. Sarah is the executive director of the Hasso Plattner Institute of Design at Stanford University, also known as the D.school. She leads at the D.school community of designers, faculty, and other innovative thinkers who help people unlock creative abilities and apply them to the world. She's a graduate of Stanford's School of Business, and she received her BA from Oberlin. As I said, she's the author of this wonderful book that we put in your tote bags quite intentionally. Because at Sozosei, we try to remain focused on human-centered design and, of course, creativity. And this book contains a number of wonderful exercises and other opportunities for you to bring that into your own work. So without further ado, and with technology fingers crossed, I'm happy to welcome Sarah. And there she is. Sarah, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm so sorry that you're missing your break, but I hope to provide a little bit of a mental break in this last session. And if you need to, please feel free to stretch a little bit, maybe just like get those end of the day wiggles out if you need to. I am thrilled and I am really humbled and honored to be speaking with this group. The work that you're doing is incredibly important, it's incredibly inspiring, and I know that it is incredibly challenging at times. And I am here today at the close of this day of your summit to really just try to provide a little bit of inspiration about how to create the space for creative thinking to emerge in the kinds of difficult and really vital work that you're all doing. So let me start just by kind of acknowledging the moment that we're in and also the context that you are designing and creating in. And I want to start by just saying, you know, thinking and creating and leading, it looks really different in a world of great uncertainty. It looks different than how many of us were trained or taught to thought about leadership. And that's true if you are in the midst of an uncertain venture, you are trying to create something and launch something nationwide that has not been done before. And it's also been very true for all of us during the past 20 months. As the pandemic has challenged so many norms, and we have had to challenge ourselves to adapt. And I was quite interested to see a piece of research that came out last year describing this in some detail. So this is a chart of the leadership skills that helped organizations the most as the pandemic really started to take hold. And I think this is quite instructive. So on the right-hand side, you see a set of skills and values that really were rising in importance in terms of propelling organizations in a positive direction. So you see things like being creative and entrepreneurial, embracing rapid decision-making, being comfortable with ambiguity, which is so important. We're going to come back to that in just a second. And then on the top of this, you'll see things like being supportive and caring. That was the most important skill that was gaining in importance, followed closely by being employee focused. And those are the kinds of attributes and skills that I wish for leaders to be exhibiting at all times. But in some ways, it has taken this massive disruption in our society to really put the spotlight on those kinds of leadership behaviors. So when I think about what this chart would look like in a photo, this is the image that always comes to my mind. This was taken at the D.school in a workshop that we held here in 2019. You can clearly tell this is a pre-pandemic interaction just based on everyone's proximity. And for those of you who may be less familiar, although at the D.school we offer many courses each year to Stanford students, we also offer training in human-centered design to folks in the K-12 sector, in higher education, in business, and in the social sector. And this is a group of leaders from all over the world who focus exclusively, they lead nonprofits, they lead government agencies, and they came to the D.school to figure out, at the intersection of systems thinking and design thinking, what could they take away that might apply, help them apply some creative thinking to their own organizations. And if you look back at that list of attributes and skills that I showed you a moment ago, I want to hone in on this one that's highlighted about being comfortable with ambiguity. This is perhaps, I think, the most important skill that has gained in importance during this period of time, and yet it is the one that we are least trained for. So my wonderful colleague, Lisa K. Solomon, likes to ask, who among us ever took a class on how to navigate ambiguity, right? This is a necessary skill for which we perhaps are arriving at this moment with a need to develop further. And I want to share the commentary of one of those social sector leaders who was a member, a participant in that 2019 workshop, who talks about what is it like to actually increase your comfort with ambiguity. So this you're going to hear in just a second from an amazing leader named LaJean Lincoln. He is the head of young people and community services at an organization called the Peabody Housing Association. And Peabody is based in the UK. And it is the oldest and largest affordable housing developer and community services provider in the country. And LaJean works on topics that are not so dissimilar from some of what you're addressing. So he works with youth who are unemployed or underemployed or struggling in school or struggling with mental illness. And so he's working on challenges that don't have clear answers, and that have been around for a long time. So I want you to hear directly from him on how he is thinking about the relationship between human-centered design and navigating ambiguity and the kind of work that he does.
If anyone knew what was going on or how to resolve things, we would have cracked it, and therefore we wouldn't have all these social problems, right? So it kind of stands to reason that whatever's happened before hasn't really worked, or not in a way to really resolve and stop certain things. So at least thinking about design, using design, applying design, at the very least, it gives you hope. But at the same time, it gives you a really structured and creative way to continue that journey, and knowing that there might not be an endpoint. You might not reach a point where you've cracked it, but you've got a really structured way to continue to know that I'm keeping going. Like, I've gone ahead, I've achieved this, but I'm not stopping there. I've achieved an iteration or a piece of work, and I'm going to learn from that, and then go on to the next step, and then go on to the next step, So that's why design. It's not about having the answer or sort of coming to an end point. It's about, I don't know the answer, but I'm going to keep going and keep going. I've got that hope and excitement, and it will always improve.
So let me emphasize where LaJean just landed. He said, it's not about having the answer or coming to the end point. I don't know the answer, but I've got that hope and excitement and can always improve. And that, I think, is one of the things that we wrestle with in design. It's that there's no perfect solution. There's no known solution that we're after. And we have to have a structured and a robust way to work in an iterative fashion to continue to improve on the ideas and to put them out in the world and to test them and to get real feedback and go from there. So at the D.school, we often talk about design as a relationship between problem solving, which many of us are trained for, regardless of what our educational or disciplinary background looked like, and also problem finding, which is what I think of as more unique to a field like design. So in problem solving, as a designer, you are rapidly experimenting, you are building early models or prototypes, you're communicating deliberately about what your vision is for the future world in which your creative work has landed, has taken root. And you're building and crafting intentionally, whether you're creating a product or a service or the design of a system or an organization. And then in problem finding, you are learning from others, both people and contexts. You're trying to connect the dots across often a combination of qualitative and quantitative data and trying to see patterns that others haven't seen before. And then you're trying to craft a vision to move from those concrete observations and data points and actually say, okay, this is the problem as we are now framing it. And often when you get handed a problem, you have to first move into a problem finding mode and challenge some of the assumptions that might be tied up with how that problem has been framed at its very core. Now, we ask students to do this all the time. And what's happening when we ask students before they move into problem solving mode to spend time in the problem finding space is that we are having them grapple with ambiguity. And by going through repeated cycles of doing creative work in this fashion, you start to actually gain some confidence about what to do when, about how to keep moving forward, about when to put your work out into the world and test it, and when to go back and refine it and perhaps do some more research. And our goal at the D.school, it's sort of a sub-goal, is we want people a little bit to fall in love with ambiguity, right? Ambiguity for many of us is kind of equated with uncertainty and with pressure and with not knowing. But the reality is that if there is no ambiguity, there is a very obvious solution, and it's not possible to innovate. And so understanding how to invite a little bit of ambiguity in the right doses into your creative process, and not to rush to closure, not to forestall that space of stewing in the ambiguity, of staying in the ambiguity while you're still exploring in multiple directions. That is one of those skills that we really want our students and our professional learners to acquire. So I want to share one concrete example of what this can look like in practice, in fact, in the healthcare space. So this is an example of a project that was done by 4 of our students starting in 2014. And this was an interdisciplinary group of students. So 2 of them were in the medical school pursuing becoming doctors. One of them was a public policy student, and the 4th one was a civil engineer. And they were partnered in a long-running class with an amazing hospital chain in southern India called the Narayana Health Hospital chain. And Narayana's mission is really about providing extremely high-quality healthcare at scale, but also at a very low cost. And so the students went into this partnership with kind of a wish list from the project partner, from the hospital, thinking that their role was really about helping with efficiency. And they thought we're probably going to be designing something for the clinician or maybe for the hospital administrators. So they went and started conducting interviews and focus groups and conversations with patients and clinicians in the hospital. And one of the first things that happened is that they noticed something that was kind of outside of what they had thought that they were going to find. And what they noticed was simple. They just saw that patients and their families are often waiting for hours, if not days. There were a lot of people waiting, and they were waiting in waiting rooms like they are in any hospital context, but they were also waiting in the hallways, they were waiting outside. And the students got really interested in this because they noticed that, in fact, this group was exhibiting like very high degrees of stress and anxiety. And so they started actually pivoting a little bit and starting to spend more of their attention interviewing the family members of the patients who were waiting. And they heard really painful stories. They heard, we're not getting a lot of time with the doctor. We don't know what the prognosis is or the diagnosis is in some cases for our family member. We're really worried about what might their needs be and how do we take care of them when they return home. So the students returned to the classroom, and they had really, really taken to heart some of these conversations that they had had with patients and their family members. And they just couldn't stop thinking about it. And so what they resolved is that they were going to design something that was going to help alleviate this fear and this suffering that was really being caused in their framing by an information gap between what the family members needed to know and what they were being told. So they thought there might be a way to connect this information need with the opportunity to provide some actual training that could also potentially support those family members and their loved ones once they returned home from the hospital. So this is a picture of one of the students, Jessie Liu. She's testing a very early idea that they had about, hey, can we actually train some of the family members in some basic healthcare skills so they can actually be part of the team that is caring for their loved one. So they returned to the hospital context the following summer, and they started testing these ideas. So in this case, this is an image from their pilot where one of their partners, a nurse at the hospital, whose name was Anand, is just training a group of family members how to take a pulse and other kinds of basic interactions. with somebody who has just had surgery or just had a hospital stay. So the students described to me that they returned to this pilot and on the second day, and they actually found that there was a line around the corner of family members who were waiting to get into this training. And they realized at that moment, like they had this feeling of, this isn't a class project anymore. But we have found actually a really important need, and we have a direction. We have a way that seems to be creating some demand and some utility. So the students decided to actually go back to India. The 4 of them moved there full time and founded an organization called Neura Health. And Neura basically trains nurses working in hospital partners, and the nurses then provide this family member training to be these care companions. And what's really incredible is that this is a fairly low-cost intervention. It sends the patient home with a trained and dedicated caregiver, and it actually has been shown to reduce the rate of hospital readmissions and post-surgical complications, and reduce the levels of anxiety and fear that the family member was experiencing from the students' original research. So the organization has scaled substantially. They're working all over South Asia. They've trained over 1.5 million family members to date. And they were really prepared, because they have all these relationships in place with frontline caregivers, to reorient during the major waves of COVID that has really struck South India and South Asia in a really devastating way. So this is a powerful story about a group of students who, because they were able to see something that was like a little bit outside of their original frame of what the problem was or what the opportunity was, they were able to reorient and actually start to address a need that was really unmet, and to do so in a way that contributes to the long-term health outcomes that everybody in the hospital system, including the patients and families, really want to see. So this is the kind of example of using design work to preserve enough ambiguity to spot those unusual opportunities. And this is an example of why I spent the last few years writing this book that you have in your bag, and that I hope you'll get some value out of, to really try to make these same approaches available to a much wider set of people. I'm hoping that this is a real resource for folks who are leaders, who are makers, who are active in their communities, or who are working in a community of practice like you all are. Now, if you've paged through it, you may have noticed there are 81 different assignments. These are assignments that we teach at the D.school at Stanford. Some of them you can do on your own. Some of them you can do with teams. They range in terms of how long they'll take you, from as short as 5 or 10 minutes to as long as many weeks, if you want to spend your time that way. And I wanted to just highlight 2 that I think could be of use to you all as you embark together this week on the kind of design work you're engaged in. So I have 2 favorites in this book that are really about opening up space for new ways of approaching an opportunity when you're either early on or when you're midway and you want to just take a step back and think about the broader context of your problem solving. So the first one is assignment number 30, and it's called Map the Design Space. And this assignment is really rooted in the reality that a lot of us think about design as just, like the physical objects that are all around us, like a phone or, a glasses case or whatever the objects are. But in reality, design is being used to create experiences, to create services, to design systems, and even to really create new technologies and to integrate data to create long-term sustainable approaches that are iterative, that you can continue to learn from. And often when we start out designing, we default just to the thing that we already are confident that we know how to build in. So if you're a service provider, you might automatically think about designing new services. If you're a product designer, you might automatically think in a more limited way just about products. But the reality is that anything today has to have multiple levels and interactions across those different types of design. So Map the Design Space is an opportunity to really start and think, well, how might all those different layers of products and services and systems and data actually come together to form the whole ecosystem for design, where all of the creative opportunities are laid out together. The second assignment I wanted to highlight for all of you is called Experts Assumptions. This is number 43. And many people have heard of the kind of classic creative activity called brainstorming, but fewer people have heard of another equally powerful one, which is called assumption storming. And assumption storming asks us to really reflect on all of the assumptions that are present in our minds, with our teams, in our organizations, with our funders, with public policy makers, that may be reflective of old ways of thinking, and may actually be constraining future opportunities for creativity and innovation. So in this assignment, you choose an area of focus. So it could be, for example, this new hotline. It could be, I just listened in on the end of the last session. It could be about what are the kinds of data that we think we might be collecting and why. And you simply list all of the assumptions that you have going in about what that should look like. And then you selectively you choose a few that are ripe to be re-examined and perhaps to be challenged. And in a playful way, you flip them. You say, well, let's assume this assumption we've held on to is not true. What could we design then? And this can often be a powerful way to start to change the dynamic and think about whose voice are we missing? Actually, how would we look at this if we came at this from a completely different perspective? Perhaps that's folks with lived experience, perhaps that's experts from other fields. And there are many ways in which assumption storming can help create both a real sense of common vocabulary across a group about what are the constraints that we're unintentionally holding on to, as well as open up that new creative space for further work. So as I mentioned, there are a wide range of different assignments in this book. I hope that you will page through and find some that strike you as ones that will be relevant to you. I don't expect anybody to be using these in a linear sequence. It's really for you to figure out kind of what are you most called to explore at this moment. And I will just close by saying that I recognize that the kinds of work that you're doing can really feel like everything is urgent and everything is urgent, right? Everything is extremely important to be working on as fast as you can. But there is a role for creativity to play in this kind of incredibly meaningful and serious work that you're doing. And I hope that the kinds of ideas about how do you stave off that rush to closure? How do you think about ambiguity in a new way? How do you actually practice and deepen your ability to notice those things that are a little bit outside the previous framing of the challenge? Those are the kinds of skills that while they're playful and they are fun and inspiring, they're also meant for serious work because they help you open that new space for looking at things in an unconventional way. So with that, I'll conclude. And I don't know if we have any time left for Q&A, but I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes if folks would like to chat.
Thank you, Sarah. Really appreciate it. So do we have any questions for Sarah? Any creative questions for Sarah? Maybe I'll up the ante a bit. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. We are at the end of the day. I see, no, oh, thank you. Sorry, Dan. Dan, will you step to the mic, or could someone be so kind as to bring Dan a mic? Thank you, Herb.
It's not a question. I just wanted to build on what Sarah offered to us. I started the year out by telling the organization that this would be a year of innovation, growth, and ambiguity. And what was so interesting was that, we're all type A personalities, and that ambiguity it wasn't the innovation and growth that slowed anyone down. It was that word ambiguity because it seemed foggy. But I'm so glad to hear it now from Sarah in terms of that, because ambiguity and innovation is really what's going to take us where we need to go. So I really do appreciate the reinforcement of that.
Great. Marvelous. Thank you for that, Dan. And I really appreciate your work so much, Sarah. I find this book very, very helpful, and I hope everyone will dig in to the ambiguity and their creativity. A few notes that I need to let you all know. For those of us who are physically present in Philadelphia, we will be having dinner This evening at 7 o'clock at the Barnes, as I promised, the museum will be open for your exploration, and we'll have some docents on scene if you're interested in a more guided tour. We're going to reconvene here tomorrow, bright and early. Doors open at 7. Our board member, Mary Michael, will begin at 8:20 with her kickoff. Remember to do your healthcare attestation. That will get you in the door. We are not testing tomorrow, so you do need to complete your attestation. And I thank you all for your attention, your participation. Thank you so much.